So apparently there was some backlash at the Berlin Film Festival. A lot of this comes over, different people that were at the film festival, basically saying that they either didn't know enough about politics or wanted to remain apolitical or didn't feel like they should be commenting on politics. My personal opinion on whether or not like actors and actresses and people in music or in the media should be talking about politics is that they should be. Now, I'm not expecting you to know everything. For the record, I'm not expecting you to know everything, but I think some of the drama that's coming out is based on like the language that people have been using. So just to talk about it a little bit like more directly, a lot of this happened at the Berlin Film Festival. Arundhati Roy, she is the writer of The God of Small Things and also of another book that's kind of very political. She is the writer of a book that is called The Doctor and the Saint. I actually have it back there, believe it or not. But it's a decent book, very, very much worth reading. I think that a lot of times, like politics can be told through like some of the maybe more competition or some of the differences in different political figures at the time. For example, the book The Doctor and the Saint talks about the differences between like Gandhi and somebody named B.R. Ambedkar. And these were two different seen from the outside world would be revolutionary figures for India post British, or I guess like during the British rule, and then in the aftermath of the British rule. Also, it resembles a book that's called, I think it's called The Sword and the Shield, that basically talks about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and their differences, and not that they were enemies or anything like that, but just their differences in strategy and like their communication styles through the civil rights movement. And so Arundhati Roy pulled out because in the I think it was some of the people that like run this they run this basically saying run the Berlin Film Festival, saying that they didn't really want to do politics in their show. And so for example, I think this was one of the guys that was I guess I don't know if this guy's in like German politics or goodness, I should know. But it was about the jury members, and they had said at the Berlin Film Festival that they do the work of the people and not the work of politicians, and politicians should be political, and people in the media or people in music and art and acting should not have to be political. I listen. I don't think everybody is going to read every single book or know every single thing about everything. But here's what I'll say is that politics isn't everything, man. Politics isn't everything. And so when politics isn't everything, and especially like the media and especially like, film, TV and all these different and music and all these different things, I can see why people would get really mad about people not wanting to be political. And to talk about it a little bit more directly is this was the comment that was made from the Berlin Film Festival. Artists should not be expected to comment on broader debates about a festival, previous or current practices over which they have no control, nor should they be expected to speak on every political issue raised to them unless they want to. And, I don't really think that this is that bad of a statement, but the reason why people are mad is because of the genocide. Genocide and ICE and all these different things. Los Angeles is the center place of a lot of like Hollywood films and that kind of thing. And so like Los Angeles has been dealing with ICE, and so especially in the aftermath of so many different people in music or artists saying that like they need ICE out and nobody's land. You can't, you can't steal land or like, sorry, I forget what Billie Eilish actually said, but that no one is illegal on stolen land, I think was the actual line, which I think is true. But once again, the basically the different artists speaking up has led to some of the other artists that are not speaking up to get in trouble. Two of those artists being, or sorry, actors in this case, being Michelle Yeoh and Neil Patrick Harris. Michelle Yeoh is an Asian woman that she's spoken a little bit about politics before, more politics that are directed at her, maybe being a woman or being Asian. And Neil Patrick Harris is gay, so he's talked about stuff like that before. And so a lot of them said that they didn't want to have their statements, given on different political issues because they were focused on doing things that were apolitical. And that to me is where everything went sideways. Is that everything is political. You know what I mean? And for example, I might not know the most about the Armenian genocide, but it is up to me to learn. And if somebody came up to me and was like, hey, you're not talking about the Armenian genocide enough, I would say, I don't know enough. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm still learning, I'm still trying. And when I do know, I'll talk about it. And essentially, first of all, that is not being dismissive. I would then ask for more information on it and all that kind of stuff. And so the point is that we know about certain things going on in popular topics like Gaza and Palestine and ICE, but some things might be more niche. But there has been this specific like pullback from different artists in the media, not wanting to talk about things that they might not know the most about or just don't feel comfortable talking about. Because as we've seen in the Epstein files, there a lot of these people are affiliated and connected. They'd be talking about their friends, to be frank. And so Michelle Yeoh, some of the backlash that she was facing on not wanting to talk about ICE at the film festival, basically has everything to do with this. And so this is an excerpt from the Epstein files of Michelle Yeoh's husband emailing Jeffrey Epstein saying it was nice to get to know you. And this is part of why the drama is there. My personal opinion on this is that not everybody in the Epstein files is guilty, but goddamn, you need to talk about it. Goddamn, you need to bring up what your affiliation is with, this like child trafficking ring that, where allegedly they were eating people, like eating children. And so we don't know. Again, there hasn't been like, sustainable proof on a lot of these things, but it's one of those things where it's a big enough deal I think, for people to talk about it. And so Michelle Yeoh saying that she doesn't know about politics and saying that like she doesn't feel like it's appropriate for her to give her public opinion or opinion publicly on a lot of these things. It just reigns is really ridiculous, especially now because with things like ICE and Palestine, you got a couple of years to learn. You don't got to know everything, but for me, what I like to do is like when it comes to ICE, there's different reporters and activists that you can point to be like, hey, this person knows a lot more, and go talk to them. I agree with them. I'm still learning, but they are the person that has been talking about this forever. And what this like symbolizes to me, or what it looks like to me, is similar to the things that was happening about like Brittany Broski and Chappell Roan. This is what Neil Harris Patrick said. That's his name, Neil Parrott. No, it's Neil Patrick Harris. There we go. And he said, I think we live in a strangely algorithmic and divided world right now. And so as artists, I'm always interested in doing things apolitical. Once again, movies are political. The actors themselves are political. They're literally in the arts. As arts gets gutted across the country, I feel like you got something to talk about, and to me, to be honest, I'd probably spin it back to something like that, to be like, I don't know a lot about Palestine. I do, but like if I'm him, I don't know everything about Palestine and ICE. But let me tell you this, is that the arts are being like defunded and stuff like that. I know more about the arts. I'm more willing to talk about that. Can we talk about that? And so this is the Brittany Broski drama that had happened, I guess 2 years ago, about her speaking on Palestine.
Saying, what dystopian universe do I have to address the situation in the Middle East at the top of a podcast episode? In what universe am I a voice to speak on this? I am the opposite of the person that should be speaking on that.
And once again, I don't think she's necessarily wrong. I think where it comes out is that she's not interested in learning is the big thing. Being like, like it's a genocide. Like we know, like this is what the reporting is on it. Like the small things, the things that it takes like 10 minutes to find out. But I think that from the person themselves individually, they might feel like there's too much for them to know to speak on these things. And again, I personally just don't think you should address stuff like this, to be honest.
But because I have a check mark and I have over 1 million, immediately I'm qualified.
And this private story.
And again, and she got in trouble for that. She got blasted. I remember her getting blasted on that. But again, artists themselves are political. They are political in nature. For example, this is Brittany Broski talking about politics.
Opportunity to do that. I can talk about who I'm obsessing over, my music taste and all that. But I also talk about, bodily autonomy and like women's rights and religious trauma and things like that. That like, I want to show people that whole, the whole.
And once again, this is not me saying, hey, you're going to talk about this, but not that. No, this is me saying that everything is political and everybody has a role to play in politics, no matter what microphone and voice you have. I remember, being one of the first people that like was learning about Palestine and being a child, essentially 7 or 8 years old, and being the only person in my spaces that knew about it. And so it was my responsibility to learn more about those things, as somebody that was the only person in some of my spaces that knew about Palestine. And again, I'm not trying to throw mud. Do you know what I mean? I'm not trying to throw mud. But what I am saying, I think it's the language that people are a little bit more upset about. And I remember Chappell Roan and her Call Her Daddy podcast, the infamous Call Her Daddy podcast, where she talked about how she had higher expectations and women in media have higher expectations to talk about different things. And so I'm just going to let this play.
Expect me to play by different rules because I'm gay and I should be more politically correct about that, and I should actually be way more knowledgeable about it. And so I get asked a lot of fucking crazy questions that a lot of my peers would not get asked. And that's because I'm gay. And that's because like I have like my opinions, but that doesn't mean I'm like completely like I don't know everything about every topic I have opinions on. Like I don't know everything about like being gay. Like I don't know.
And again, I to be honest, looking back, these weren't terrible things to say. I think that it became this thing that was like a lot bigger because people are like, why aren't you speaking on these things? Because again, when a full-blown genocide is happening, I think it is everybody's like responsibility to talk about those things. For Chappell specifically, is that she benefits and makes a lot of money off of the gay community, off of music that like a lot of gay people listen to. And so I think this was a part of the thing. And I think what this was specifically referring to was trans people like, hey, Chappell, can you speak more about like trans rights and stuff like that? And once again, I just personally think you don't gotta answer these questions, like cut it out the video, whatever it is. And, it takes some time to form that opinion a little bit more. And so I remember, and for the record, she is right about like women and gay people and trans people being held to a higher standard. Nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about Draymond Green and some of the other members of the Golden State Warriors, like visiting Israel and touring with the IDF. What she's saying isn't incorrect, but it comes off as this like me. Please, can we talk about me? Please, can we not talk about these other things that are bigger than me? Because I don't know about anything else other than me. And so that was, I feel like at the time, especially like what people were feeling and saying. And again, I think it's just the language thing, to be honest, is that I'm not expecting every single person to know every single thing about every single body and read every single book. But once again, there's a vague awareness. Like, you know what I mean? Like when people bring up the Uyghur Muslims, why don't you jump with the Uyghur Muslims? It is like, well, actually, like I'm just not the right person to talk about that. Do I believe it's a genocide? Do I believe that these things are horrifying? Yes, I do believe that. But the reality is that there are experts. You know what I mean? I'm not Norm Finkelstein, the Norm Finkelstein of the Uyghur Muslims. I'm just not. And so, but again, it is the responsibility of the person when you realize that you don't know something to do your best to learn. And especially if you've been asked it multiple times, I see why people get frustrated with different people. This to me right here, what FD Signifier is about to say is one of the best answers I think that have ever come out of these like questionings where it's like, hey, why don't you talk about this issue more? Or do you feel like you need to present your lens on these certain issues? And FD Signifier, is political. He is a person that talks about politics and culture on his channel. So he might just have, better media training when it comes to this kind of thing. Not media training in terms of like the official thing, but in terms of just being on the internet and knowing how the internet can get.
How would immigration reform come into America?
That's you getting out of my zone. Because
there's so many specifics possible.
That's just for me. Like I've talked about the fact that like I learned up until October 7th, a couple of years ago, I had learned everything I knew about what was happening between Palestine and Gaza from hip hop, right? And I've obviously quadrupled that information since then. But I make it a point, like I've gotten comments like, why haven't you made a video about Palestine? And it's like, I really don't think that it's appropriate for everybody to have the take, especially people with larger platforms. If that's not really your thing, if you got to do a whole bunch of research and Googles to talk about this extremely important thing,
complex.
You probably need to just platform the motherfucker that knows it.
That's my opinion. That's not my, that what he said right there is my opinion. And I think that it's, it says a lot that, you have some people explicitly being like, I'm not going to talk about this, or like, I kind of don't want to know about all these things. And again, I get it. I think that like as a brown person, me, myself, and I, when I see these different like genocides happening to brown people, like for example, like slavery in the UAE towards my people, and also like slavery in Dubai towards my people, I take this position where it's like, hey guys, like I am so close to this issue that like it hurts to talk about, and I'm gonna mess up, and it's hard to say it on camera, and all these different things. Doesn't mean it's not happening, but here are your sources. Here's where I'm learning from. I'm still learning. Like this is the kind of thing I think that should be done. Is that when you know that some kind of atrocity is happening, there are so many people today saying that that atrocities are happening, that in which places they're not happening. You know what I mean? Where they're trying to center the issue on something else. And so I really do think that like going to somebody that's a little bit more trustworthy in your spaces or knows a little bit more is the first thing you should do. And then like as you like go on this process of learning. But again, I think this is a white and black issue. Sorry, listen, as a brown person, I'm going to tell you, I think that it's just the language used. Is that like as a brown person, people come to me a lot and ask me like different things about things that I should know about, to be honest, things that I should know about. And I have to keep telling them, hey, I'm still learning. Like, this is the book that I'm reading. Like, please, like, give me some time. And white people are kind of like, I can't read every book. And they just come off as like smarmy and annoying and, that kind of issue. But if there was an answer to, hey, can you talk about politics more? I think this is the answer. And I think that some of what's like motivating this is some of the other black and brown and femme like artists and musicians like actually talking about some of these things. For example, I remember this with Doechii. Was this like a year ago or last year, something like that, where Doechii was talking about Donald Trump and ICE?
See, this is my first BET Award, so this means a lot to me. I grew up watching this. I do want to address what's happening right now outside of the building. There are ruthless attacks that are creating fear and chaos in our communities in the name of law and order. Trump is using military forces to stop a protest. And I want y'all to consider what kind of government it appears to be when every time we exercise our democratic right to protest, the military is deployed against us.
And I think this is a lot of what's driving these creators to be like held accountable. There's no such thing as holding a creator accountable. To be honest, like most today, like some of these like creators, they're like institutional. Do you know what I mean? They were with the rise of YouTube or with the rise of Hollywood or whatever it is, and they are not going to be cut loose. unless they talk about politics and somebody higher up, doesn't have those politics. But again, somebody like Doechii, who is like, I guess like a first generation star, somebody who's like kind of newer to this industry, her talking about it immediately really puts to shame some of the people that have been here longer, might be have a little bit more support and structure and in the industry to say, you know what, I'm not going to talk about this. And especially like if you're in LA, you see it, you see ICE, you know what I mean? And so, for example, this is Billie Eilish also talking a little bit more about politics.
Everyone else in this category, you're so amazing. I love you so much. I feel so honored every time I get to be in this room. And as grateful as I feel, I honestly don't feel like I need to say anything, but that no one is illegal on stolen land.
And there is Republican backlash anytime one of these artists do that. And I think a lot of these creators and artists, especially if they know they have like a more like right-wing base, they specifically are like, I'm not going to talk about this. I'm not going to talk about this, because they're worried about their bag. They're worried about their bag. But once again, I'm not expecting every single person to know about every single issue. I think it's just the tone people have when they're like, no, I can't, 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 no. As opposed to, you know what, I need to learn more. Like, I need to learn more, like, before I'm willing to speak on this. I do know that it's a genocide or an atrocity or whatever it is. I do know that people are getting attacked, but I just can't speak on this right now without saying anything beyond that, because I don't know some of the deeper issues and some of the more historical things. And I think especially being closer to the things like themselves, like being a woman or being brown or whatever it is, how deep this shit can get. You know how deep the things can get with talking about these different issues. And so once again, there was a drama at the Berlin Film Festival around this. And so, good luck to the artists or the actors that were performing. But no, unfortunately, I do think that some of them need to speak up. And to be honest, most of them need to speak up, especially if they're referenced in the Epstein files. I mean, holy, you know what I mean? Like, her husband's in there. And whether or not they need to speak to the public is very different than whether or not they need to release some kind of statement, tweet, whatever it is.